The Last Dragon Bond. Romance Fantasy Series. Rebecca Yarros. Published by Owl Winters, 2025. Copyright. This is a work of fiction. Similarities to real people, places, or events are entirely coincidental. The Last Dragon Bond. First edition. May 14, 2025. Copyright 2025 Rebecca Yarros. Written by Rebecca Yarros. Preface. The Last Dragon Bond is a story of magic, love, and self-discovery, a tale about a girl who discovers that she is far more powerful than she ever imagined, yet burdened by a destiny she didn't choose. It is a journey through a world filled with kingdoms, dragons, and the ever-present tension between duty and desire. At its heart, this story is about what happens when two souls are bound together by forces beyond their control, and what it means to embrace one's true power. I've always been fascinated by the idea of fate, and how our choices shape it. What if you could change your destiny? What if the most dangerous bond of all was the one that connected you to something greater than yourself? In writing this, I wanted to explore these themes and to give you a story that is as thrilling as it is heartfelt. Table of Contents. Prologue I. Chapter 1, The Bonding One. Chapter 2, The Prophecy Unfolds 6. Chapter 3, Hunted by Kings 12. Chapter 4, The Rebels Court 18. Chapter 5, Blood and Magic 23. Chapter 6, The Dragon's Curse 28. Chapter 7, Betrayal at the Border 33. Chapter 8, The Firestorm 39. Chapter 9, The Family's Secret 44. Chapter 10, The Dragon's Voice 50. Chapter 11, The Siege 55. Chapter 12, The Last Royal 61. Chapter 13, The Last Royal 66. Chapter 14, The Last Royal 71. Chapter 15, The Breaking of Chains 76. Chapter 16, The Winds of Fate 82. Chapter 17, Shadows of the Past 87. Chapter 18, The Eyes of the Eclipse 92. Chapter 19, A Kingdom in the Ashes 98. Chapter 20, The Heart of the Storm 103. Chapter 21, The Heart of the Storm 109. Chapter 22, A Storm Unleashed 115. Chapter 23, The Winds of War 120. Chapter 24, The Final Tempest 124. Chapter 25, The Storm Unbound 129. The End 135. 2. Prologue. In a world ravaged by war and ruled by corrupt kings, the storm was both a curse and a blessing. For generations, the power of the storm dragon had been sought after, an ancient force capable of reshaping the world itself. But for one young woman, this power came as an unexpected burden. Kyra, a soldier's daughter with no magic of her own, never imagined that she would become the one to carry the storm's legacy. When fate thrust her into the heart of an ancient prophecy, she found herself bound to the last living storm dragon. This bond, meant only for royalty, would make her the most powerful and the most dangerous person alive. Hunted by kings and courted by rebels, Kyra had to navigate a world where nothing was as it seemed. As the storm inside her grew stronger, so did the forces that sought to control it. The kings, desperate for the power of the storm to cement their rule, would stop at nothing to claim it. The Eclipse, an ancient order of warriors once tasked with guarding the storm, now saw it as a weapon to dominate the world. Kyra's journey was one of self-discovery, of learning to wield the power she had been entrusted with. Alongside the enigmatic Last Royal, whose own past with the storm was shrouded in mystery, she ventured to the heart of the storm itself, hoping to unlock its secrets and restore the balance the world so desperately needed. But as the battle for the storm's power reached its climax, Kyra discovered that mastering the storm was not just about harnessing its power, it was about understanding the balance between creation and destruction. The storm was a living force, connected to the very fabric of the world, and if used recklessly, it could tear everything apart. Now, as the king's forces close in and the eclipse prepares to make their move, Kyra must make a choice. Will she use the storm to protect the world, or will it consume her and everything she holds dear? The final battle is approaching, and the storm will be the key to either saving or destroying everything. The winds of war are rising, and Kyra stands at the eye of the storm, ready to face her destiny. The question is not whether she will survive, but what kind of world she will leave behind when the storm is over. Chapter 1: The Bonding. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the mountain range, sending dust and leaves skittering across the barren ground. The world seemed to tremble beneath the storm's fury, a relentless reminder that nature, when unleashed, could not be tamed. Kyra stood at the edge of the cliffs, her cloak fluttering in the violent gusts. Below her, the valley stretched wide, a patchwork of thick forests and winding rivers, but her focus was not on the land. It was on the sky, the swirling black clouds that seemed to pulse with a strange, dark energy. She had always felt the storms, but this one was different. There was something unnatural about it. The wind carried with it a hum, a whisper that reached deep inside her chest, vibrating in her bones. It wasn't the wind. It was something more. Something ancient. Kyra clenched her fists, trying to shake the unease that gnawed at her. She wasn't afraid of storms. She'd grown up in them, had been taught to read the wind's whispers and the sky's shifting patterns. But this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It started with a low rumble, so deep it shook the ground beneath her feet. She stepped back, instinctively bracing herself, but the sound only grew louder. It was as if the storm itself was alive, waking from a long slumber, stretching its wings to cover the sky. A brilliant flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening crash of thunder that made the earth tremble. For a moment, everything went dark. Then, without warning, a bolt of lightning shot down from the clouds, striking the earth not far from where Kyra stood. The air smelled of ozone, sharp and bitter, and for a breathless instant, Kyra wondered if the lightning had struck her. But when she opened her eyes, she saw the figure hovering in the center of the clearing, its massive form silhouetted against the storm. A dragon. It was like nothing she had ever seen. Its body was a blend of shifting shadows and crackling lightning, scales that flickered with electric blue and silver as if made of the very storm itself. Its wings spread wide, dark and powerful, rippling with raw energy, and its eyes, those eyes burned with an intensity that made Kyra's heart skip a beat. They were gold, like molten metal, and they locked onto hers with a piercing gaze that seemed to see straight through her. The dragon let out a low growl, a sound that rumbled deep within the earth, and the air around her seemed to crackle with tension. Kyra could feel the force of the dragon's power resonating through the air, through the ground, through her very being. It was as if the storm and the creature were one, bound together by an unspoken force. Her breath caught in her throat. It shouldn't be here. There were no dragons left. Not since the wars, not since the last of their kind were hunted down and driven to extinction. This was a creature from legend, a creature that was meant to be a myth. And yet, here it was. Kyra's mind raced, her instincts screaming at her to run, to flee back to the safety of the town. But her feet were rooted to the spot. There was something about the dragon that held her in place, something she couldn't explain. The storm, the dragon, the power, everything felt connected, as if the world itself was urging her to step forward. So, she did. She took a tentative step toward the creature, her heart pounding in her chest. The air around her grew heavier, charged with an energy that seemed to draw her closer. Each step she took felt like she was moving through a sea of static, her hair standing on end, her skin tingling with an unfamiliar warmth. The closer she got, the more she felt the storm's power swirling around her, surrounding her, like a cocoon of energy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The dragon didn't move as she approached. It watched her with those burning eyes, its massive form unmoving, but the air between them crackled and hummed with a strange, unearthly force. She was almost close enough to touch it now, the scent of ozone thick in the air, the storm crackling with every heartbeat. And then, something strange happened. The dragon's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, Kyra thought she saw a flash of recognition in them. A flicker of something ancient, something beyond her understanding, passed between them, an unspoken connection that stirred something deep within her. The dragon's head lowered slightly, almost as if it were offering her something. Kyra didn't hesitate. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and brushed against the dragon's scales. The contact sent a shockwave of energy through her, a surge of power that filled her entire body. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a brief, terrifying moment, she thought she might pass out from the intensity of it. But then, something even more terrifying happened. The dragon's power surged through her, flooding her senses, filling every corner of her being. It wasn't just a connection, it was a bond. A bond that tethered her to the dragon in ways she couldn't comprehend. She could feel its thoughts in her mind, could hear its voice in the depths of her soul. It was a presence, powerful and overwhelming, and it seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it were part of her now, as if they were one. Kyra staggered backward, clutching her head, the overwhelming sensation threatening to consume her. Her vision blurred, the world spinning around her, and she felt as though she might collapse at any moment. The dragon's power was inside her, alive and pulsing, and she couldn't shake it. She couldn't free herself from it. The storm roared around her, deafening, and the dragon's voice echoed in her mind, a low rumble that reverberated through her very being. "You are mine." The words were simple, but they struck her with a force that left her breathless. She could feel the weight of the dragon's power settling deep within her chest, and for a moment, she feared she might explode from the sheer intensity of it. But just as quickly as it had come, the sensation faded, leaving her gasping for air, her head spinning. She looked up at the dragon, her heart still racing, her body trembling. The creature's golden eyes met hers again, and this time, there was no fear in them. No hostility. Just an unspoken understanding. It was bound to her now, and she to it. Kyra's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, her hands pressed against the dirt as she tried to steady herself. The bond was real, undeniable, and with it came a heavy responsibility she couldn't yet fathom. Her thoughts raced, her mind spinning with questions she had no answers for. What did this mean? Why her? What was she supposed to do with this power? And more than anything, what would the world think of a soldier's daughter bonded to the last storm dragon? Before she could gather her thoughts, a voice called out to her from the distance, pulling her from her reverie. She looked up to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a man dressed in dark, weathered armor, his eyes fixed on her with a mixture of fear and awe. "The dragon," the man whispered, his voice trembling. "It's real. You're bonded to it." Kyra didn't answer. She didn't have to. The storm dragon's presence filled the air around them, heavy and suffocating, as if it were daring the world to acknowledge the truth. Chapter 2, The Prophecy Unfolds. The sky was still shrouded in darkness as Kyra stumbled through the dense forest, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the storm dragon's presence, a constant hum in the back of her mind. The bond was undeniable now. She could sense its power, feel it coursing through her veins like wildfire, and yet she was still reeling from the shock of it all. She had been connected to the last storm dragon, a creature of legend, and she had no idea what that meant for her, for the world, or for the prophecy that seemed to hang over her like a shadow. The man in the armor had watched her in stunned silence after the bond had been formed. His eyes had flickered with fear, and she had felt an unease settle in her gut as he had spoken those words, "You're bonded to it." The weight of those words pressed against her, and she had barely been able to respond before he had turned and disappeared back into the trees, leaving her alone with the dragon's power. Kyra's thoughts were still a whirlwind, but as the evening stretched on, her mind began to clear. The forest around her was eerily quiet, the rustling of leaves and the calls of nocturnal creatures the only sounds she could hear. The bond with the dragon was new, and yet, it felt like it had always been there, like a part of her she had never known existed, suddenly awakened. Her body still hummed with the dragon's energy, a force so strong she was certain it would tear her apart if she let it. She paused at the edge of a small clearing, her breath catching in her throat. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting silver beams onto the ground. The air smelled faintly of rain, a promise of the storm that still brewed in the sky. Kyra swallowed hard and stepped forward, unsure of where she was going or why she had come this far. It was then that she heard it, the soft whisper in her mind, the dragon's voice, calm and clear, though she could not explain how she understood it. You will find the answers in the prophecy. Kyra's heart skipped a beat. The prophecy. The words that had echoed in her mind since the moment the dragon's power had surged through her. She had no idea what the prophecy was, nor did she understand how it connected to her. But the dragon was certain. She had to find it. And that meant finding the truth. With renewed determination, Kyra pushed forward, weaving her way through the forest. The bond with the dragon was still fresh, like a living thing inside her, thrumming in rhythm with her heartbeat. She could feel its power, feel its presence as it moved alongside her, an ever-present force guiding her steps. The bond was not just one of magic, it was one of understanding, of something deeper. Kyra could sense the dragon's thoughts, and though they were not words, they were emotions, memories, impressions that filled her mind like flashes of lightning. The creature's ancient power was immense, and yet, it felt distant, as though it were separated from the world by some invisible barrier. The path grew steeper as Kyra climbed higher into the mountains, her feet slipping on the damp earth. She knew where she was heading. There was a place high in the peaks that was said to hold the answers, the hidden temple where the prophecy had been recorded centuries ago, its secrets sealed away in stone. It was a place she had heard of only in whispers, a place that was said to be lost to time. But she had to find it. Her thoughts turned to the man who had seen her bonded to the dragon. She had no idea who he was, but his words had unsettled her. He had looked at her like she was something dangerous, something not meant for the world. What did he know that she didn't? Why was the bond between her and the dragon so important? And why had the creature chosen her? What was it that the prophecy spoke of, and why did it all seem to lead back to her? A low growl rumbled from the dragon's depths, and the air around Kyra seemed to shudder with its presence. She stopped for a moment, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the sensations that flooded her. The dragon's power was pulsing inside her, alive and strong. It was as though the world itself bent to its will, its presence stretching far beyond the bond. She felt the connection more deeply than ever, as though the dragon were entwined with her very soul. You will understand soon, the dragon's voice whispered again, its tone warm but laced with something ancient, something that made Kyra's skin crawl with both fear and awe. The wind picked up, and the trees around her began to sway. Kyra's heart quickened as the storm clouds above her darkened, swirling in the distance. She didn't know why, but she felt a compulsion to reach the temple before the storm hit, as though it were part of her destiny. The prophecy, the dragon, the war that loomed on the horizon, all of it seemed to be drawing her toward this unknown destination. It wasn't long before Kyra reached the top of the mountain. She was breathless, her muscles aching from the climb, but she could see it now, an ancient stone structure rising from the jagged peaks, covered in ivy and moss. The temple stood tall and silent, like a forgotten monument to a past long gone. It had been centuries since anyone had set foot here, and yet the air around it was thick with the weight of history, as though the very walls held secrets that had been waiting for someone to uncover them. Kyra approached the temple, her hand instinctively reaching for the door. But before she could touch it, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The dragon's growl echoed in her mind, and the air crackled with energy. She stepped back, her eyes wide as she turned to face the sky. The storm had arrived. The winds whipped around her, fierce and unrelenting, but Kyra stood firm, knowing she had no choice but to move forward. The temple was the key to unlocking the prophecy. The key to understanding her bond with the dragon and her place in the world. With a deep breath, Kyra stepped into the temple, the door creaking open with an eerie groan. The interior was dimly lit, the only light coming from the faint glow of the storm outside. The air inside was heavy with the scent of old stone and dust. As her eyes adjusted, Kyra saw what she had come for. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, each one depicting scenes of dragons, storms, and kings long forgotten. But it was the large stone tablet in the center of the room that caught her attention. It was inscribed with words she couldn't yet understand, but the dragon stirred in her mind, urging her to approach. Kyra stepped forward, her fingers brushing over the stone. The moment she touched it, the ground beneath her feet shifted, and the walls of the temple began to hum with a low, resonant sound. The carvings on the walls seemed to come to life, shifting and moving as though they were telling a story that Kyra could feel deep within her. A voice echoed in her mind, deep and resonant. It was the dragon's voice, but this time, it was not a whisper, it was a roar, a primal sound that filled her entire being. The prophecy, you must listen. Kyra closed her eyes, allowing the words to wash over her. In her mind's eye, she saw images of a world in chaos, kingdoms at war, and dragons falling from the sky. There were flashes of her own face, twisted in pain and determination, and the storm dragon, its wings spread wide, its power unmatched. And then, the words of the prophecy began to unfold. Two souls bound by fire, by blood, by storm. One shall rise to bring peace, the other to destroy. The dragon's heart beats in the chest of the chosen, and only the bond will decide the fate of the world. Kyra's breath caught in her throat. The words were clear now, and they echoed through her like a warning, like a prophecy she could not escape. The storm dragon's power surged within her, and she understood. She was the chosen one. The bond between her and the dragon was not just fate, it was a choice. She could bring peace, or she could destroy everything. The weight of it crushed her. How could she make such a choice? She was just a soldier's daughter, a girl with no magic. But the dragon's power was inside her now, and she could feel it. She could feel the storm brewing inside, ready to consume everything in its path. The temple fell silent, the hum of the stone fading. Kyra opened her eyes, her hands trembling as she pulled away from the stone tablet. The world outside was still raging with the storm, but inside, it was as if time had stopped. The prophecy was clear, but what did it mean for her? She had no answers. Not yet. But she would find them. The storm had chosen her, and now she had to choose what to do with that power. What she did next could either save the world or destroy it. Chapter 3, Hunted by Kings. Kyra's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped out of the temple, the weight of the prophecy pressing down on her. The storm still raged above, lightning flashing across the sky in violent streaks, as if the world itself were reacting to the words she had just discovered. The temple's ancient stone walls had whispered the prophecy to her, and in those whispers, she had learned her fate, or at least, a part of it. Two souls bound by fire, by blood, by storm. One shall rise to bring peace, the other to destroy. The words reverberated in her mind like an unrelenting drumbeat, and her pulse quickened with each step she took. She could feel the storm dragon within her, thrumming with energy, as if it too understood the weight of the prophecy. She had no choice now. The dragon had chosen her, and with that bond came the responsibility to change the world or see it crumble. But before she could process the magnitude of what she had learned, a distant sound reached her ears, hoofbeats, echoing through the forest. She paused, her breath catching in her throat, as a sense of dread washed over her. It wasn't just the storm, it was something else. Something far more dangerous. Kyra looked over her shoulder, toward the direction of the sound. Her hand instinctively went to the dagger at her belt, though she knew it wouldn't be enough to protect her from whatever was coming. The hoofbeats grew louder, and before she could react, a group of riders emerged from the trees, their horses galloping toward her with swift precision. She could see the glint of armor in the moonlight, the dark shapes of men clad in the regalia of the royal army. Kyra's blood ran cold. The king's emissaries. She had been warned. The kings would be hunting her now, seeking the dragon's bond, and she had been foolish to think she could run from them forever. The riders pulled to a stop before her, the sound of their horses' hooves striking the ground like thunder. They wore the insignia of the royal army, red banners embroidered with gold thread, and their expressions were cold and unforgiving. At the head of the group rode a man who appeared to be their leader, his eyes sharp and calculating as they focused on her with unsettling intensity. "You are the one," the leader said, his voice low and commanding, as though he were certain of the truth. His gaze flickered to her side, where the storm dragon's presence seemed to pulse beneath her skin. "The one bonded to the last of the dragons." Kyra didn't flinch, but the storm inside her stirred, a reminder of the power that now lived within her. She tried to calm her breathing, but she could feel the dragon's power surging, a wild force she had yet to fully control. The bond was still so new, so raw, and every time she encountered someone who knew what it meant, it felt like the very air around her crackled with electricity. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest. "I am bonded to the storm dragon." The leader's lips twisted into a smirk, as though her admission had been expected. "The kings have been searching for you," he said. "You are to be brought before the throne." Kyra's mind raced. The last thing she wanted was to fall into the hands of the kings. She had heard the stories, their lust for power, their desire to control the dragons, to harness their magic for their own agendas. But that wasn't her only concern. There was the prophecy, the words that spoke of destruction, and she had no idea what path the storm dragon's power would push her toward. "Why would you want me?" she asked, trying to buy time, her eyes flicking between the riders, searching for a way out. "What use would the kings have for me? I'm nothing but a soldier's daughter." The leader's eyes narrowed, and his hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "You may not be royalty, but the dragon has chosen you. That makes you valuable." He glanced over at the other riders, who remained silent but tense, watching her every move. "The bond between you and the dragon is not just a weapon, it is a key. The kings would pay dearly for it." Kyra's heart sank. It wasn't just about power anymore, it was about control. The kings didn't care about the storm dragon. They wanted what it could give them. And she was the one holding the key to everything they desired. Before she could think of a response, the leader signaled for his men to dismount. "You are coming with us," he said, his tone brokering no argument. "We are not here to negotiate." Kyra's mind raced. She could feel the dragon stirring inside her, its power a constant hum in the back of her mind. It wanted to break free, to unleash its full strength, but Kyra held it back with every ounce of willpower she had. The last thing she needed was to reveal just how much control she had over the beast. But she couldn't let them take her. Not like this. Not without understanding what they wanted, what the kings planned to do with the bond she now carried. With a surge of adrenaline, Kyra drew her dagger from its sheath and took a step back, preparing herself to fight. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, her voice sharp, filled with defiance. The leader's eyes flickered with amusement. "You'll regret this," he said, reaching for the hilt of his own sword. "No one defies the kings and lives." Without warning, one of the riders lunged toward her, his sword drawn. Kyra reacted instinctively, sidestepping the strike and delivering a swift kick to his chest that sent him sprawling to the ground. She barely had time to register the move before another rider was upon her, swinging his sword in a wide arc. She dodged again, but this time, the force of the blow caught her arm, leaving a shallow cut across her skin. She hissed in pain but didn't let it slow her down. The bond with the storm dragon surged within her, and she could feel its power